On September 16th, 2022, 22-year-old Mahsa Jina Amini died while in custody of the government's morality police for wearing improper hijab. This sent shockwaves throughout Iran. A massive protest movement commenced in response as Iranians demanded justice for Amini and equal rights for women. My name is Sydney Martin, and I'm the program manager and a researcher here at the Iran 1400 Project. I recently conducted interviews with a variety of scholars about the woman life freedom movement. Here's what they had to say.
So I do think that the impact of this movement in Iran has encompassed both actually conceptual and observable changes, right? However, the prominence of conceptual change over, I would say, observable change can be kind of attributed to the idea that societal transformation should happen with actually altering people's thoughts first, right? So over time, these altered thoughts, I would say, evolve into observable actions. So this, I would say, phenomenon can be described as, I address it as latent cultural change rather than an immediately manifest one, you know. Um, Aside from my own definition of these two phrases, conceptual and observable changes, I would like to mention a couple of conceptual changes that I think happened. So one of the earliest effects was, I would say, raising awareness that went beyond gender inequality in Iran. You know, this movement taught Iranians and, of course, non-Iranians to avoid simplifying restrictions imposed by the Islamic regime and learn the extent to which mandatory hijab is linked kind of with women's empowerment. So people do not, I mean, those who support the movement do not oversimplify mandatory hijab by, highlighting that because their bodies are half covered, it's not worth fighting. You know what I'm saying? So they have kind of learned that there is no measure of compromise. They continue to fight no matter the size of the cloth or what part of it should cover. Only that small piece of cloth or headscarf has been, as we all know, a symbolism of oppression over the past 4 decades because it's mandatory and it comes from a forced ideological system. I think this matters a lot because this attitude towards hijab has been unfortunately widespread in the West, even among academics, where non-Iranians and Iranian academics who have not lived in Iran, who have not been in that context, sometimes express that it's not a big deal to wear a headscarf. So I see this not just as a conceptual effect, but also observable effect. Women's civil disobedience that we see of them removing their hijab whenever they can, even for a short time, itself shows the connection between, their attitudes, their thoughts, and their actions. So uh, the movement also has fueled a cultural shift by mobilizing Iranians to confront cultural patriarchy. Individuals are stepping forward to challenge the this type of patriarchy, cultural patriarchy, even when it lacks state support. This cultural shift is significant, I think, as it targets both systemic and sociocultural patriarchy, which often reinforce each other, you know. Also, the movement has triggered broader public discourse about gender equality. It fostered kind of conversations, even in public spaces like coffee shops. And I do believe that this discourse, the creation of this discourse, has been very important and instrumental in kind of reducing participation in the state associated religious rituals like Ashura. You know, the number of people who attended this religious ritual has decreased significantly. That is, I do believe, is a very important and notable change. Um, Another conceptual change that becomes evident is that place discussion on the common on right and wrong are, I think, transcended. The movement has prompted a rejection, of the state's discourse, questioning, their predefined notion of rights, norms, culture. I think this shows a huge, a significant mental shift that moves away from the state-defined parameters towards, challenging the oppressive us, versus them mentality. That is a very sick mentality based on the ideas of chastity and honor. So we have crossed this. People have been challenging this mentality of us versus them. People are trying, have been trying to emphasize on their own definition of right and wrong, not the right and wrong defined by the government. Um, One more primary, actually, conceptual effect that I see in this movement is the act of defiance. Iranians are not just resisting the government, they are defying it. That is very different than resistance. And we can see, like, through, like, they face fines, they face today, like, after, like, around a year, detentions or restrictions. They have demonstrated their resistance against the regime's imposition of mandatory hijab. And I would call this the act of defiance, that has become a visible form of everyday resistance. That also, it definitely shows kind of unwavering determination in challenging this oppressive, system, culturally and systemically. Um, One more, I would say, one last positive impact of this movement, I would say, is that Iranians have moved beyond merely advocating for regime change. They have challenging paternalistic attitudes and social, these social discourses that we see today is not just about regime change, and we don't see it even in Iran, but also in the Middle East. That's why I really think that this movement is a super movement, a term used by, if I remember correctly, by Asif Bayat, abar jumbesh, that can increase kind of empowerment, self-confidence, and leadership skills among individuals, particularly women. So, in terms of negative effects, I see a backlash from definitely conservative factions. We see a backlash that accompanied by new mechanisms of, suppression. The regime, as we are seeing, like, has escalated the fining of women for, like, perceived inappropriate hijab or bad hijab. Even they have resorted to unique and unprecedented methods, such as forcing them to visit mortuaries, to wash dead bodies. So this backlash, I would say, poses security risk, leading to feelings of danger and anxiety, especially from آتش به اختیارها. So yeah, this is, I think, one of the main negative impacts of the movement that unfortunately women, particularly in Iran, have to, face it and fight. Uh, this movement, I think, has encountered many challenges, many obstacles. The regime's heavily armed suppression, kind of has prevented a street protest due to fear of violence. We also have, because people are not weaponized, and the government is heavily weaponized. And the other obstacle is legal barriers that have prevented some from honestly actively participating, while the resistance of discriminatory laws, hampers also progress, you know what I'm saying? So because of these like barriers, many people, avoid participating. Also, we have like internal divisions among opposition groups that some people believe it has kind of hindered unity. Although I argue that confronting these divisions early on clarifies kind of our future path. Um, and how Iranians responded. I think international support and civil disobedience have kind of responded to these challenges, which shows the resilience of the movement. They have engaged in activism and advocacy to promote women's rights, and this includes organizing protest campaigns and awareness raising efforts through social media and online activism, and also through art and culture. So we see that artists, writers, musicians, filmmakers have used their work, have used their skills to address gender inequality and gender oppression in Iran. We also have international organizations and movements who supported them, supported Iranians, shared their experiences, and amplified Iranians' advocacy effort that I personally witnessed over the past year while I was like actively organizing events in Philadelphia. Also, in terms of challenges, I would say insufficient funding and resources, I believe, hindered kind of the effectiveness of this movement, women life freedom movement initiatives. Unfortunately, we have been unable, for example, to send money to Iran to help those affected financially by the regime, or the economic downturn in Iran prevented Iranians inside to help, their fellow protesters. And also we had like internet shutdown that still we see in Iran, that created many communication issues. One ideational transformation could be educational awareness that I emphasize a lot. Creating discourse and promoting open conversation, I do believe that we should, is very important. Really work at culture. Dr. Homa Hudfar also, she has mentioned this before a couple of times, that we really need to work at culture. We should listen to one another. We should learn to criticize and to be criticized. I think through conversation, through discourse, we will learn to avoid harmful stereotypes, promote the value of women's participation in different fields, and kind of fortify a culture of gender equality. I think this is very important because discourse, as we know, creates knowledge, and knowledge is power. So I think it is time to work on thoughts rather than focusing on the notion of, regime change. As I think once we start, working at the culture and making, mental shifts, obviously gradually, other goals such as, regime change would happen gradually. Otherwise, without working at culture, we will be disappointed again and again, So we need fundamental changes in our thoughts. um, Another ideational transformation, I think, must happen in academia. We should encourage academics to engage in public activism, bridging the gap, the lacuna, between academia and advocacy, academia and activism. So academics before that makes, I think, I have mentioned academics in, you know, they should step toward activism, not in just terms of writing books, and articles, which itself, I acknowledge is a form of activism, but also in terms of communication and creating discourse in public spaces, and social media, in order to fulfill the, previous transformation that I mentioned, that was creating discourse. So academics can, play a huge role in this. So I think that academics need to consider activism in a much more broader context. So individuals, either well-known activists or those who would like to be active, would, kind of acquire enough skills and knowledge for their advocacy and the path they have stepped in. And one more ideational transformation, I would say, is, would happen through media representation. I do believe that we should encourage a more diverse and inclusive portrayal of women in media, and showcase their multifaceted roles, different achievements and struggles. So I really think that this can help break down harmful stereotypes and reshape kind of societal perceptions. And what I can tell about, institutional transformations, obviously the very first step is legal reforms, right? So we need legal changes that address gender-based discrimination, violence against women, and other issues. This can include revising laws related to marriage, divorce, inheritance, and domestic violence, so that we can ensure they uphold, women's rights. And another element could be supportive work policies. So we do need enacting and enforcing policies that promote work-life balance, like equal pay, for equal work. This would enable women to participate more fully in workforce and reduce kind of their traditional barriers. Also, another institutional transformation could be access to healthcare. We should ensure that women have easy access to comprehensive healthcare service, including, reproductive health and family planning. Another institutional transformation could be related to social service. We should make sure to establish accessible support services for victims of gender based violence and discrimination that we see a lot in the US. I have been to a couple of like shelters in the US. They're like victims of gender based discrimination. They live there and they are supported there. So this includes, as I mentioned, shelters, counseling, free counseling, and legal aid to help women escape kind of abusive situations and seek justice. We really need the same thing that we see here. I'm not trying to say that here is everything perfect when it comes to women's rights, but we see some initiatives, like shelters, like free counseling service, or like healthcare aid, and also educational opportunities that matters a lot. We should invest in educational opportunities for women and girls, and make sure that equal access to quality education at all levels, would happen. Because I think that this education, the opportunity to access highly qualified education, would empower women to pursue diverse careers and contribute to actually various sectors in society. So, generally speaking, I think that these transformation, both ideational and institutional, should be pursued collaboratively, with diverse, you know, stakeholders, including government agencies, civil society organizations, and international bodies, and generally public, social media. So a combination of ideational and institutional transformation has really the potential to make significant progress towards the goals of this movement, women, life, freedom in Iran.